Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brad Hughesby, and today we'll be talking about Notre Dame football recruiting. This is my dream class for the 2023 class. I make these every few months, maybe every 2, 3, or 4. It's April the 12th of 2022, so I'm going to make another one here for the 2023 class. As you can see, I have a quarterback and 2 running backs. To start us off, Dante Moore. Dante Moore just visited Notre Dame at the end of March for an overnight visit with his dad. He also announced that he would be taking all 5 official visits. If I had to guess, those schools will be Michigan, LSU, Oregon, Notre Dame, and probably a school like Miami or maybe Ohio State. We'll see what happens. Dante Moore, though, every bit of a 5-star player, is a top 10 consensus national player according to On3. And I totally back that ranking. Next is Jayden Limar, uncommitted prospect, but I think Notre Dame is way out ahead here with the top competition probably being UCLA at the current moment. He'll be on campus in South Bend for the spring game weekend, and I think he commits shortly after that. I like ND for Jayden Limar. Next, Cedric Irvin, committed to the Irish back last year. He's locked in. I don't see any other school really pulling him out of Florida. He is currently playing football at Christopher Columbus High School. He just transferred there from Glover Prep. This one's solid for Notre Dame. Next, I have 4 wide receivers, and one of them I think will be committing in short order. That is Braylon James, who is scheduled to commit in just about a week. I think the top competition is Stanford for Braylon James. They were the leader probably for the longest time in this recruitment until Chauncey Stuckey really turned up the heat with Braylon James. Made a visit to Texas a few weekends ago, LSU a few weekends ago, but I think this one's pretty much wrapped up. I love the Irish here. Next, we'll talk about Carnell Tate. I honestly think Tennessee is in a little bit better of a spot than ND is at the current moment, but Georgia's really involved. Alabama is trying to make a move. He'll be taking his officials to, I expect, all the schools in his top 5, which were Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, and Notre Dame. The big thing here is winning mom. I think his mom prefers Tennessee and Ohio State over the Fighting Irish, but we'll see. They're really trying to connect with them. NIL, major deal here. Name, image, and likeness, that is, for anyone curious. Tennessee, of course, is the school that just landed 5-star quarterback Nico Iamaleava. And you have to suspect there was a lot of money going into that. Reported are around $8 million. And so, there's going to be a lot of money on the table here for Carnell Tate. Tennessee-wise, I don't know how much, but, I mean, Tennessee's boosters, they're not doing anything wrong. This is exactly what is allowed to happen, or different sponsors or brands that are working with Tennessee. It's completely legal, which I don't like, but that's just kind of how it is. So watch out for that. And then let's go to Ronnie Gallagher next. Ronnie Gallagher will also be on campus for the spring game. Penn State is in the lead. He's just visited there more than anywhere else. He hasn't really taken a ton of visits. Was at West Virginia a few weekends ago. But ND really is a shot to make a move. If he doesn't love South Bend, though, I think he probably stays in Happy Valley. And then next is Jaden Greathouse. I honestly debated putting on guys like Rico Flores or Tyler Williams. I think those are a little bit easier of targets to get. Maybe not Williams, but I think if they really, really push for Flores, he'll be on campus for an official that June 10th weekend. They could possibly land him. But Greathouse, Texas is definitely the main competition. They lead. Took a visit to Clemson last weekend for their spring game. If they offer, that would be huge, but they don't give out a ton of offers, so we'll see what happens there. But Texas, Clemson, and ND are definitely the schools at the top of his list. Next, you have your tight end commit, Cooper Flanagan. He's locked in with the Irish. And then I only have 3 offensive linemen. I think they're going to stick to just 3 this class, maybe 4. We'll see what happens. Sam Pendleton was actually a guy I was debating putting on here. He was just on campus for the first time after being offered in March. He loved his time. Notre Dame is probably in his top 3 schools now with NC State and Michigan. Clemson's also involved, but I think NC State's probably the leader. I think he wants to stay close to home, and NC State's the closest to home out of those 3. But on this list, I have Sullivan Abshar, Monroe Freeling, and Charles Jaggy Shaw. All elite players, all in the top 100 according to On3 specific rankings. And boy, these are some talented offensive linemen. I think Absher is the real deal. I think he's a top 50 or 60 player in the country. Same thing with Jaggy Shaw. I'm not as high on Freeling, still a very talented player. But Clemson probably leads at this current moment for Abshar and Freeling. Jaggy Shaw, I think ND is way out ahead. He is going to take his officials, though, into the summer, so keep an eye on that. Other schools can make a push. But with Freeling and Abshar, and ND's in the top 2 with Clemson for both. I mean, Abshar is also talking NC State a lot, but I don't really see them as a huge contender. And then Freeling, I think, is just kind of down to Notre Dame and Clemson. Both will be visiting for the spring game weekend. That will be huge. And Jaggy Shaw just made it out this past weekend to see practice, to talk with Coach Hestead. He's never talked with him before. So that was very, very important for him. I mean, he lives in a tough spot. The only school that's really close to him is Iowa, and that's probably an hour or 2 hours. He lives in a pretty remote part of Illinois on the west side of the state. So let's go to the defensive side of the ball. We'll start it off with Keon Keeley. Viper / defensive end pledge, probably more defensive end. I think he's locked in, guys. Number 3 player in the country according to On3. I like where the Irish are there. I don't see him flipping or doing anything like that. Brendan Vernon next, he's as committed as you can be. I really like ND to hold on to those 2. And then next, I think they're just going to take 4 guys, which I'm not happy about. And I think those next 2 are going to be Jason Moore and Devin Houston. The 2 Maryland boys. I could see Bobacord Traore being another guy in the mix here, but never made it to campus. I really thought he'd make it to campus a week or 2 ago. He never did. So Jason Moore and Devin Houston are just more probable for me. Devin Houston made it to Wake Forest last weekend, was at Michigan a few weeks ago. I think Indy leads. He had the best visit there. He was visiting that last weekend in January. And then Jason Moore has only been to campus for the North Carolina game in November. He really needs to make it back, and I think he will, probably for a summer official visit. But I like the Irish in both of those recruitments. Far from done, though. At linebacker, you have Drake Bowen committed, absolutely locked in. And then you have Preston Zinner, a more recent commit. He's locked in as well. And then you get to Jaden Osbury. Now, this is a recruitment that many people think is LSU's to lose. I think the opposite. I think ND's his top school. If I had to guess, I think he's going to end up donning the blue and gold. Now, that is not locked up by any means. He's going to be taking his officials. I think he wants to stretch the process out. His brother, Austin, who's a freshman cornerback at Auburn, stretched the process out pretty long into the winter. So we'll see what happens with his little brother, Jaden. But at this current moment, I like the Irish. And then Sam Mpemba. He's more of a Viper. He's kind of an athlete. I'm just going to put him as that, but I labeled him as a linebacker. Miami just got him on campus for a visit. Notre Dame had him a few weeks ago, same with Michigan and Mizzou. I think those are probably his top 4. Alabama, he was high on for a while. Oregon, Florida's in the mix, but kind of a lot of schools. And Pemba's a tricky guy to read. Didn't take any visits last summer as he was in Africa visiting family. And he's kind of been all over the place schools-wise. Now, I think Notre Dame leads. Notre Dame sources think they lead as well, I believe, but this one is far from done. He's going to take his officials and take his time, I think. Now to corners and safeties. I have them all on one, and sorry about the weird cropping on the bottom. To make them all fit on one, I kind of had to squish them. But we'll start on the top left with Peyton Bowen. Top 40 player according to On3. I absolutely agree with that ranking. I think Bowen is one of the top safeties in the class alongside Caleb Downs, who we'll talk about in just a second. He has everything. Just had a huge meet for his track team. I've been following that. I think Peyton Bowen's my favorite recruit, so I'm all in on that guy. Always following what's going on there. But Oklahoma and Ole Miss are definitely factors. Not so much Ole Miss, but more Oklahoma. His buddy is Jackson Arnold, their quarterback commit. ND fans, of course, know who that is. But yeah, I mean, Notre Dame should feel confident. I think he's going to end up in South Bend, but I'm definitely not certain. Oklahoma is a very intriguing option. Justin Rhett is next. I honestly might be more worried with Justin Rhett than I am with Bowen. Rhett just took or will be taking a visit to Georgia, I believe, this weekend. Maybe he just took it. I believe it's this upcoming weekend, though. Alabama might be pushing. Oregon, he has some connections to. We'll see. But Justin Red is definitely another guy to keep an eye on. Adon Schuler's locked in. He was at Kentucky this past week with his team. They were traveling throughout the Midwest on kind of a college tour, but he was just there to show support with his guys. He's locked into Notre Dame. His coaches are probably some of the more pro-ND coaches in the country. They absolutely love Marcus Freeman, Chad Bowden, and all those guys. They've developed really strong relationships with them, and Adon Schuler just thinks the world of the coaches at ND, so I'm not worried about Schuler. Next, Caleb Downs. This is going to be a hard recruitment to win. I'll just keep it 100. Georgia is right in his backyard. I believe his mom's a teacher. Georgia's a good academic school. Everything just kind of makes sense there, but Notre Dame is definitely a dark horse. I think they have a better shot than a school like Oklahoma, but Clemson's a nice option. A lot of Georgia kids end up at Clemson, especially in the secondary. Alabama is Alabama. They'll get you to the NFL, and then Notre Dame's probably running 4th or 5th at this point, but they'll get an official, and he'll be on campus for the spring game. Last two, Vernon Hannafin. I like ND there. Clemson and Alabama. Miami just offered. He's kind of blowing up. He's an athlete, but I think he'll end up playing rover or safety at the next level, maybe wide receiver. But he's kind of a jack-of-all-trades guy. And then Christian Gray is next. Guys, don't forget about him. I still like ND to win this one. He'll be on campus for the spring game, but I do think he will take his summer officials. So, yeah, that's all I have. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Comment if you have any ND recruiting questions. And that's it for me.